And welcome everyone to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. This is Series 11. I can't believe I'm saying that. Session 4. I'm Sue Macdonald. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hours and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this important session this evening. Now, First of all, I'm going to just swiftly introduce our speakers for this evening, and this includes Steph Wild, Steve Huggins, and Clare Beesley. And they should all appear magically any second. And because this is what we always do to our speakers, is ask them to share with us a moment of the week. So I think I might start with Steph for a moment of the week. Please share.
I didn't actually realize this is for me to share a moment. I thought it was your moment of the week. It's not in context to anything specific, sorry. I'm trying to think of something. I can't think of anything now.
Well, I could share a moment of the week. I could share a moment that I picked one of my large pumpkins, not for carving but for eating, and it gives me a great pleasure that it was a tiny plant and now it's a great big beautiful pumpkin sitting in my glass house getting ready to be eaten. So how about Steve? Have you managed? Sorry, I've obviously discombobulated our speakers. I do apologize, but have you got a moment that you'd like to share?
I certainly have. It's not as pleasant, I suppose, as growing your own, but it is food based. I've been in London for the last couple of days' work, and I had a fantastic curry on Monday night, and I enjoy a curry, and it was lovely. So that was my moment of the week so far.
And we're not validating any particular restaurant, just a delicious curry.
It was just a very good curry. Yep.
Excellent. Good moment. Okay, how about Clare?
Oh, thanks. So yeah, mine probably is in context actually, because we've been doing a lot of work in our organisation that has in excess of 22,000 employees this week about baby loss in the workplace as well. So we set up a dedications page that went out to our staff as well as our families. And it was really heartwarming to see colleagues from years past, grandparents who have had a grandchild that's died, and just to put their dedication on that page too. So yeah, that was something that was I felt was really positive this week.
Gosh, that's a huge moment of the week. It sort of reminds me of all the, I've been looking at Twitter quite a lot. Anyone who watches this will know I'm a Twitterer, and there's been so many messages, more than most years. I think it's some of the stigma about baby loss is being lost, thank goodness. And people are able to name their babies and even post beautiful photos of little beautiful babies. So thank you, Claire. That's lovely. It's a lovely, lovely share. Love the curry. We'll catch up with Steph later. We'll get to share something else. Don't you fret. Okay, I'm just going to do my usual, just for those of you who are new to Maternity and Midwifery Hour. You may have thought we've been here forever, like Women's Hour. Someone did say it was like Women's Hour for midwives and student midwives, but actually we're 3 years old. We're as old as the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, because we started during the pandemic as a way, and you'll remember the lockdown when we couldn't go out to study days, we couldn't go to conferences, we couldn't meet each other except at work with all the PPE on. And we really felt, because we couldn't run the festivals face to face, we needed some way to connect people, to connect midwives and student midwives. So we started this maternity hour. Initially, we did a lot around COVID because there was a thirst for knowledge around COVID, because many of us didn't know very much. Most people didn't know very much. And it's kind of carried on, and we've changed our focus into things that midwives and student midwives have said we'd like to know more about. And sometimes it's things I think, I think I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And what's lovely about this is we tape everything. We record just about everything. So if you have you missed anything, and you start looking at the back catalogue in Matflix, which is on the resource page if you haven't seen it online, you can find and update yourselves on all sorts of things. And this is a really good way of updating yourself if you're due for revalidation as a midwife. Very useful. You can catch up with things, really contemporary issues. And you can also share with your colleagues. And if you wanted to kind of start up a discussion group on a particular topic, and this topic we're going to be discussing tonight is especially important and something that actually would merit a really good discussion, share it. We love you to share our sessions. It's all free. The only ones that we are charged really is if you want a subscription, and that can be through your institution, your trust, or it can be personal subscription. And that's really good if you're doing like a project or a dissertation, because then you can get all these beautiful things in lovely box sets. Again, really good, really useful. I'm going to say a big thank you to our lovely student midwives, our maternity care support workers, our midwives. I always thank you, and I mean it most sincerely. You're doing a great job. It's hard at the moment, as it's been for the last 3 years. It's been many years because we haven't got enough midwives. There's too much, there feels like there's too much to do, and it's a very stressful time, especially at the moment. It feels especially bleak when there's all the things going on in the world that we're having to cope with and think about. So look after yourselves as much as you look after your women and families and babies. Okay, I'm going to whiz on to news. Now, the biggest news, of course, is the news in Israel and Gaza, and we're praying very much for peace and some healing for people who've lost or have people injured in the conflict. It's terrible, and we don't know the half of it. And it's almost too much to bear, I have to say, but our thoughts are with people who are suffering through that at the moment. Okay, I'm going to move on to different sort of midwifery things. There's a toolkit for the implementation of the WHO intrapartum care and immediate postnatal care recommendations in healthcare facilities, launched this week, and that's on the resource page. It's also Black History and Culture Month, and the theme is celebrating our sisters. Now, I think that's a really good thing to do, and there's some fantastic resources on the Royal College of Midwives site. But it's sort of, I was just browsing around, as you do, and I found something that made me think, I think we've got a bit more work to do, and it's called Only for the White, and it's a document in the Nurse Education Today, and it's called Only for the White, the qualitative exploration of the lived experiences of Black, Asian and minority ethnic midwifery students. So it's pertinent to us in the UK. And it's quite disturbing because it's students that were asked about their experiences. Many of them were talking about the cliqueiness, even just as they came into student midwifery, not, a few weeks in. And there seemed to be a message that they were perceiving that midwifery was a bit of a white profession. And I think we really need to address that, because there are, in our profession, thank goodness, many Black and brown midwives and student midwives, and we need to celebrate that and actually look at what we're doing to support them and make sure they feel part of us. We all need to be a big family. We can have arguments and debates, but just like an ordinary family, we should be together. So that it's useful to have a look at this, because it's got, and I love qualitative work because you have little comments from real people, and someone saying never work in ex-hospital girls, never. You can imagine someone saying that. So that's on the resource sheet if you're interested in that. There's also a piece of research that's just come out into smartphone technology being used for pregnant women with diabetes, which is really useful. Again, another link in our resource sheet. And then another good thing for those of you who are into infant feeding, you probably remember there used to be an infant feeding survey every couple of years, which hasn't happened for a little while. And there's going to be a 2023 infant feeding survey run by Ipsos, and you need to know about it. And we put the link in the resource page. Becomes a very, very useful resource, not just if you're writing an essay on breastfeeding or artificial feeding or bottle feeding, but also about providing services for mothers and babies and families. So it's really useful. Now I'm just going to move now, almost on perfect timing, just to say that now our colouring is almost perfect now for the blue and pink of Baby Loss Awareness Week, which is informing our evening tonight. And there's lots and lots of events going on. And I know on Sunday there's going to be the lighting, which I know that probably our speakers are going to talk about, but that's the sort of candlelight on Sunday to remember these lost babies. Whatever gestation, those babies are very precious. And I did notice that there is on this campaign now, you can actually customize and download the baby's name as a template to use at, and that's hashtag BLAW. But it's, again, the link is on the resources. So if you know of any parents for whom this would be useful, this is really good, because one of the important things, I think, is naming that baby. That baby is a real individual to that parent. So we're going to be looking at helping and supporting mothers and families. So be aware we are going to be talking about loss and bereavement. I say that, it seems obvious, but this is a trigger for some of those of you who've lost babies or have been grieving for lost members of family, whatever, and also for those midwives who are dealing with that at the moment. So be aware of what we're talking about. Now, our first speaker, and I'm delighted to introduce Clare Beesley, who's been with us before. She's lead midwife for bereavement at the University Hospitals, Birmingham. She's previously won loads of awards. I'm not going to list them all, but she has had the Butterfly Award and a prestigious RCM Award in 2017. And she's also been published in the new Mayes Midwifery with her colleague Sam Collinge. And that's it's quite a big chapter. It's a very good chapter if you want to know a little bit more, because obviously we have limited time. It's an hour, but we'll do our best. So I welcome Clare. The screen is now yours.
Thanks, Sue. Hopefully everyone can see that now. So I'm Clare Beesley, and just a little bit of background about me. I work in a large inner city hospital in Birmingham that has 4 sites, and my role is really to oversee the care and support of families wherever they are in our organisation, whether that be in our emergency departments, gynae wards, neonatal units, or our maternity unit. So covering all aspects of loss, whatever stage in pregnancy that be. And I've been a qualified midwife for 27 years, and 20 years of that have been as a bereavement midwife. Mm-hmm. So I've seen lots of changes over the years, and grateful of the opportunity to talk today about pregnancy loss and how the importance of caring for families. So as you can imagine, this is a massive topic, and I could talk all day, probably all week actually, about how important care of bereaved families is. But I'm just going to give a little bit of a recap and then probably just explore a few aspects of this in more detail. And starting with really why we're here and what the heart of what we do, and that is making sure that when a baby dies, that the care that the parents received is always led by what their needs are. And for them to be able to do that, we need to give families information so that they can make the choices and make the decisions relating to their care and the care of their baby that's led by them. One of the important aspects of this is definitely continuity of care, so that families feel that they're in a safe space to be able to receive that information at a time that's right for them, and ask questions when they're ready. Environment's always an important thing, and in the busyness, as Sue's referenced earlier, in the busyness of our daily lives at work, it's so important when you are walking a family into a space, whether that be to break bad news or to care for them when their baby has died. Think about your environment, think about the noise, think about where you're taking the family, because those are things that they will remember. And we want families to come into our care knowing that we do really care about them, and the little things do make a difference. So just always have a look around you and think about what things you can change. And along with parent care, we also need to consider that we need to care for the whole family. There are siblings involved that have lost a brother or a sister. There are grandparents whose own children are grieving and they've lost their grandchild as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then one of the other things is just making sure that families know that we are caring for them. But just because their baby has died, it doesn't mean we stop caring for their baby too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Ongoing support. So we see families, or many of you here will see families in a snippet of time when their baby has died, but the aftercare and support that follows that is so important to how their family will grieve and progress in their journey of grief, that we will also reference, because it's important to remember that when a baby dies, that stays with the family forever, and their grief is a journey that they learn to live with. One of the things that I really wanted to discuss before, just to also start off with, is that you will see there is a diagram on the side that shows different pregnancies at different gestations. And it's so important that we recognise that you can't measure someone's grief by the stage they are in pregnancy. You can't compare someone, for instance, that's had 7 attempts at IVF and this is their last chance and they've had a miscarriage at 6 weeks, against somebody who's had a term stillbirth or a baby with a life-limiting condition that's going home and will die at home. These aren't things that we can measure. What we have to do is make sure that all families get the same access to support, the same access to care, and that care is then led by the parents. We do know, and this is why I've brought it up again today, is that we do know there are inequalities in care of pregnancy loss, and the recognition of the earlier losses in miscarriage care isn't the same. And you hopefully will have heard of the pregnancy loss review, and I think if you haven't, you'll hear more about it as time goes on. It was heard in Parliament and there were 71 recommendations for trust to follow, which will hopefully make sure that families that have had a miscarriage get that same access to care and support that they deserve. So one of the things that I think was so important to talk about, and just to speak a little bit more about, is that parent-led care and how we give that parent-led care. So at a time when a family are devastated and have been told the news that their baby has died, they need information. They need open and honest, sensitive information, and they need time to absorb that information. So giving a family lots of information just as they're being told that their baby has died, they may not be ready to receive that information. So it's also about reading the cues for when a family are ready to receive that information, and allow them constant, time for questions and information, and reiterating information about what's going to happen to them and what to expect next. What's also very important is that we discuss with them what to expect about what happens next. So what to expect in their labour and birth, the pain relief options that are open to them, how long this may take, and even if we don't know how long it may take, giving them some time frames around that about possibilities so that they're not shocked by anything that happens. Making sure that they know where they're going to be cared for, and if that place of care may change because the mom's condition in her health changes, that they're prepared for those changes in place of care. And then broaching the difficult subjects of them then spending time with their baby and the memory building all around that. We've mentioned continuity of care, but this just reiterates really the need that of how important this actually is, so that families feel safe with the people that are caring for them, that they don't have to keep repeating what they've already said, and that it builds up a trusting relationship so that the families feel that they can ask questions that they may be really frightened to ask because they don't think it might be appropriate to ask. And that's all about that continuity of care and relationship building. Talking through memory building and having time with a baby is also really important to discuss at a time that's right for a family. And again, anything that we've discussed with the family, any updates, it must be documented in that individualised bereavement care plan for the family, so that if healthcare professionals are involved in their care, that they've already read upon this, that you go into seeing a family already knowing what they've discussed, so that the family don't have to keep repeating themselves and explaining everything all over again. Care of their baby. So as I've said, it's really important that parents know that just because their baby's died, it doesn't mean that we won't be caring for them. And the little things make a difference. If a family have named their baby, and they may well have done earlier on in their pregnancy, say their baby's name, write it down, make sure people know what their baby's name is. And if their baby's in the room, spending time with them, acknowledge their baby. Don't walk around and ignore their baby. That's their baby. Take time to go over, recognise that, talk about the baby, talk about any hair they might have, their tiny little fingers or toes. Make sure that you just talk to the family and give them the opportunity for the families to talk back and open up them conversations. I think we all know the importance of memory making, and giving families that opportunity to make a lifetime of memories in a very short amount of time. And it's important to involve the family in that if they wish. These aren't our memories, they're a family's memories, and it's important that if they wish to be involved, that they do so. Having time with their baby afterwards is, again, led by a parent, and they need to know that option's there for them, and they need to know where their baby is at all times. And even when they've left the hospital, they need to know that they can come back and see their baby if they wish, or where their baby will be cared for. When families do choose to keep their baby with them for a prolonged period of time, it is important to have those sensitive discussions about care of the baby and preparing the family for the changes that may take place in their baby. And again, whatever the choices are, that's a family's decision. There is no right and wrong. We're there really as healthcare professionals to give families the information and then support their decisions. When a baby dies, there are sometimes siblings involved, families and friends, and we often see children coming up to spend time with their sibling. And again, that is an important consideration. But as healthcare professionals as well, we also need to be aware of how to support the children, how to give the parents advice about how they may want to approach telling their children that their brother or sister has died. And again, we're there to support them. It's also important to consider the support networks around a family and making sure that they have access to information and support for them so that they can support their loved ones too. I think it's also important to acknowledge that some families don't have those support networks too, and we need to think more about other issues that may complicate a family's grief, whether that be that they're new to our country and they haven't got any support networks at all, whether there are relationship issues and there is conflict within a family. All of these things are things that we need to know about and understand and support a family in whichever way that we can, and that includes cultural and religious aspects as well. I've mentioned this earlier about when a family go home, the aftercare and support that is available is very, very important, and it's very important that we offer individualised care and support and recognise that this may be changing, because as a parent navigates their way through grief, their needs may change. The access to them wanting to access support may change. Other things may happen in their life that may lead them to wanting to access support when they didn't want it to before. So it's all about individualising that care, but making sure that families do have the opportunities to access support in them weeks and months ahead. And our role really is to support the families, but also to signpost them to the amazing charities that are available locally and nationally. And sometimes that means that those families that are particularly struggling, sometimes they just can't pick up the phone themselves or make that first contact. So as healthcare professionals, we're there to do that and just help them make those first steps in accessing that support. It's also important to discuss what grief may look like to a family, the emotions that they may feel, the shock, the disbelief, the anger, the tears, the numbness. All of these things are going to feel very abnormal to a family, but we do need to normalise and prepare them for what they may be feeling. And alongside that as well, and this again goes with continuity of care and why it's so important to have bereavement leading services, is that continuity of care for a family, and knowing that you may have more concerns about a family that you already know about and how they've changed or their inability to function with daily life. It's all about recognising that and making sure that families can access mental health services as well. And also communication with our colleagues in the primary and secondary healthcare sector to make sure that this is a whole package of care and support, not just from one area, that everybody knows about the loss and everyone's there to support the family. I've just put up there some of the things that we use locally, some local and national support services, but we're not here doing this alone. The charities that are available are immense and they are all tailored towards individual needs, and there is some amazing support out there, but we do also need to recognise that families that experience baby loss, we know that it can affect their mental health. They may have increased anxiety, there may be some post-traumatic stress, and it's just about recognising that and making sure the families get the right individualised treatment for them. I don't know whether anyone will have seen this, but I have shared it with Sue. This is a very short video that summarises an important step forward in bereavement care. When I very first started in bereavement, it was very much around that time when a family were in the hospital. And then it's sort of gone towards the, really good aftercare and support. But now that's grown again really into recognising that when a baby dies, a family will go through a whole journey of grief, and that their life will learn to live around that grief, but that grief is always there. So when we see families in subsequent pregnancies, when we need to understand that there might be increased anxiety, there might be triggering moments. So always look back at someone's history and try and understand why someone might need that extra care and support. So yeah, if you do get a chance, watch that, because it's only a few minutes, but it tells a whole story around the journey of grief. And how we do all of this is a difficult job to do, and it is very challenging for staff, and it is something that does affect staff, and we know that, and that's because we're caring and we don't want to see a family go through that, so it does impact us as well. So it's really important that we recognise that and we take some time to just take a step back. Don't be frightened to seek support. It's normal to want to offload sometimes to someone, to reflect with someone. Reflective practice, I think, is always such a really good thing to be able to do. Acknowledge your own feelings, your own challenges, and also acknowledge your own training needs. If it's something that you're worried about, go and try and work with your bereavement team if you have one. And just expose yourself to more information, more training. And also, if it does happen in the workplace, always just check in with each other before you leave for a shift, to just see how you're all doing. And I think a lot of people do get their support from their colleagues who have that understanding. And that's it from me, a very short whistle-stop tour of bereavement care. So yeah, thank you for listening.
But I think incredibly important, Claire, to kind of given us an overall reminder of some of the things that you can take for granted. I mean, even the kind of the journey of grief I love that, because it very much is a journey, and just like any other journey, even a family can have different speeds of their journey, can't they? So we can get into that. And I know some people are sending questions in. What a wonderful audience you are. Already there's questions coming in for us. Fabulous. But I'm going to now move from saying thank you to Claire for starting us off so beautifully, and to introduce we've got a sort of double act here now. So we've got Steph Wild. Welcome to Steph Wild. She joined the CuddleCot team in October 2022, but she has, well, it's not a but, and she has a wealth of knowledge and experience in healthcare, and specifically in bereavement. Her focus is to enhance the service that we provide by providing a seamless and supportive environment throughout, from order, delivery, and the use of the CuddleCot. And you may not have heard about the CuddleCot, and you're going to find it really, really useful, because this is something comparatively new, and some units may not have access to this, so it's useful for you to know. And Steph also works alongside health professionals, charities, non-profitable organisations and families, and she's been at several of our festivals sharing that knowledge. So that's Steph. And also we have Steve Huggins, who brings a wealth of experience across various fields, including PPE, CBRN, you're going to have to share that one, Steve, large-scale decontamination, mess, fatality, capacity issues and solutions. And Steve is very customer-focused and has been key to driving growth both in the UK and with overseas customers. And he was also one half of the team behind the concept and design of the CuddleCot. And feels very passionately that every family should have the choice of spending time with their baby when they've died. And speaking with families who've used the CuddleCot and hearing their stories and sharing these with the team makes him very proud, and so should that CuddleCot has helped in some small way. So welcome to Steve and Steph. The screen is now yours.
Thank you very much, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm just going to open up some of our slides, and we'll speak a little bit in context of the slides and a little bit out of them as well. So as Sue has welcomed us, I don't think you'll need to hear any more, but that's our names. And a little bit more about CuddleCot. I think it's quite important for people to understand why it's suggested that you should cool a baby to begin with. And a lot of people don't always understand why you would necessarily do that. So with cooling a baby, actually keeping a baby cool enables families to be able to spend time with their baby. They can then have that opportunity to create memories, and sometimes families aren't going to do that immediately. So having that time with them makes them sometimes realise that these are memories that they want to make. The things like concepts of memory boxes and things can feel a bit overwhelming at first, or it can feel a bit alien, and then sometimes that time makes them feel a bit differently, and then it can facilitate those memories. And sometimes they might wait until family members have arrived, or they might need to travel as well. So it now gives families more of a choice that if somebody is coming to see them, that they can wait and that the baby can remain with them if they want to. It also slows down the process of changes to appearance, which is decomposition. And so the baby won't look as significantly changed as if they weren't cooled. So CuddleCot is kind of more than just the device. We're very much a brand as well as a device. So I'll talk through a bit more about the device in a minute. But the actual kind of brand of us being CuddleCot is being able to make sure that, as well as providing the CuddleCot system, we also provide the things in the network of the things that are needed for families. So as Claire mentioned earlier, support for families is so important, and equally for health professionals. So one of the things that we've now got on our CuddleCot website is something called Grief Chat. So Grief Chat is a free resource. It is trained therapists who specialise in grief. and that's available to any health professionals, students, and the families, 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. UK time, Monday to Friday, so they can access that at any point. If they want to just talk to someone, and obviously that's someone that's impartial, it's confidential, that doesn't come through, it's on our website, but it doesn't come through to us as a team. It's completely through a therapist. So sometimes families need to talk to someone, they don't know who to talk to. And for some people, like Claire said, don't want to pick up a phone. We've kind of become that society equally where we are more kind of on our phones and typing and texting and emailing, and people find comfort in that. But equally, it can be switched over to a phone conversation if somebody needs that. And sometimes as a health professional, it's kind of, sometimes you might just want that. You might want to just have a conversation with someone. And sometimes it's just to seek that reassurance you've done the right thing. We've also got other resources on our website. So we've got training materials, which can then support you as a health professional to feel more confident, especially those that are students. And it is an area that is very heavily under educated in. It's unfortunately doesn't become a priority. And it seems to not really be changing. It's not really changed for a number of years in terms of it being readily available in a lot of universities, and then the same even in mandatory training. It's often the first thing to be cut off, mandatory training, if anything gets kind of cut off from that, because it becomes one of those things that just isn't a priority. But equally, it means that because you tend to not have as much exposure, because you don't have as much education, because you don't always have as much exposure in practice, then it means that your skill sets are often feel like you've not quite got them, but you need that exposure to get them. So it's kind of something that you have to allow yourself to become exposed to before you become confident. But equally, exposures through training, meeting a bereavement team, if you're a student, have spoke days and opportunities to see what it's like in different parts of the country, and different hospitals will do different things. So even if you think you're going to qualify and go into the hospital that you work in currently, still go and see another hospital and how they do it, because there's, when you're further down the line from being qualified, there might be things that you can bring in or suggestions you can make to the team that you have. And you just never know what you might learn from somewhere else. We have other resources, so quick videos that you can access, just kind of Q&A things, troubleshooting information. Sometimes it is just down to kind of the person using a device, for example, and sometimes it's just that you've not had time to read the instructions and you just need a bit of help, and we have information for that. As well as general support, we also have servicing. We've got servicing based within the UK and the US, that the CuddleCots can come from all over the world to both those points. So it means that if the CuddleCot needs service, we are specialists at it. We've made it. So it just means that we can properly make sure the device is working. We can replace components. We can check that the health of it is okay. We've had the CuddleCots run for years and years and years without needing much else than a service. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can visit our website. But equally, if you just want to ask about it, we can help you with those questions. And it is also the most popular cooling product worldwide. So not even just in the UK. There's over 2,000 in the UK and the US, each country alone, as well as scattered all around the world. And there's quite a few reasons for that, and I'll kind of go into more of why the CuddleCot is a bit different than some of the devices shortly. What I'm going to do is ask Steve to kind of introduce a bit more of how the CuddleCot came about and why it was made, if that would be all right, Steve.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Steph. The CuddleCot came out, as Sue mentioned, I'm one half of the team. Myself and my colleague Simon, we were serving police officers, and we'd had a little bit of experience dealing with families around stillbirth. And once we then started working on a much, much larger system, which was designed for cooling bariatric patients, families came to us and said, had we thought about doing something for babies, so they could actually spend that time with baby? And the truth is we hadn't, but we got our heads together, and we came up with the CuddleCot, basically. is obviously a nice small portable device, which is obviously what we wanted. We wanted something which could be portable and which was very, very quiet. And yes, I've got a background, as Sue mentioned. CBRN, by the way, is chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological. It's basically what fire service and nuclear energy. But so I work in several facilities and markets, and one of them including is I do a lot of work with mortuary managers. And I was at a conference with them only a couple of weeks ago. And it was amazing how many people had actually heard of the CuddleCot, heard of the great work, obviously, that happens on the ward, and were aware that obviously the baby doesn't need to go down to the mortuary, which is far, far nicer for the family, just be able to have that time with baby, which is what obviously Claire and Steph and everybody out there, it's what everybody agrees with. It is extremely important that the family get that choice. I'm particularly lucky. One of the things I do, I go over to the US quite a lot. In fact, I go on Friday, and I meet families out there, and I go to charity events and fundraising events. And the word that the families use that have used these CuddleCots for their baby is joy. How much joy they got out of actually sharing that baby with the rest of the family, even friends, neighbors. I've met so many families who have told me that, and met these out families, that just how large they can be and how much joy they got about sharing the experience of their baby. And what you guys obviously do is just superb. And I think I would be safe in the knowledge saying that the UK is the world leaders in care for the baby and after death. And the United States have an awful long way to go. But getting there, we're changing cultures, we're changing the difference. But no, it is, as Steph said, it's an extremely important tool, and it's there. And please, if anybody has any questions, just come and talk to us. We're not a huge company. We're only based in Gloucestershire. So we're happy to help anybody where we can.
So the CuddleCot itself is quite different to some other devices because it isn't a system that the baby gets placed into. However, instead, it's a system that works with whatever you want to place the baby into. So the actual CuddleCot itself is the blue device that, for those that are watching on the screen, are able to see. And then it uses water that then goes through a hose and into a pad. So the pad is then compatible with any cot, any Moses basket. It can be placed in bed with the parents. It can be held in the parents' arms. So it means that it's adaptable to wherever they want their baby to be. So for some families, they don't want to let go of the baby, they want to hold them. And they can do that without feeling cold themselves, and the baby can be wrapped suitably to do that. And it means it can also be adapted for different gestations and size of babies. So for some smaller babies, being in other devices means that they look really tiny in that device, whereas you can get a small Moses basket and use a smaller pad and then place the baby in there instead. It can be taken home quite easily because everything for a CuddleCot fits in one storage case that has a handle, so it can be carried quite easily and everything can be fitted in there. Families have often sometimes either chosen to use their own Moses basket or cot at home, or they've even brought their own into hospital because it's the only chance they're going to get to use it, so they want to use their own. So it just gives a bit more choice. It cannot physically reach a freezing temperature. It's limited, so that cannot happen. So it means that even if the pad is directly on the baby's skin, it cannot cause any additional damage to the baby's skin. And it's been made specifically for the purpose that we're using it for. A lot of other devices have been adapted based on things like refrigeration, which realistically is not made for babies and babies' skin, and it's just an adaptation to use it for a baby, but it doesn't necessarily make it safe on skin and things like that. And sometimes it takes additional kind of inputs to prevent damage happening to a baby. So it's something that's been kind of quite seriously considered with the CuddleCot, is that we're not here to make this any worse. We can't make it better, but we can kind of smooth out the process so that we're not making any additional barriers be added in the way, but we can add things in to make this process smoother. There's a couple of things that people sometimes do, and one of those is adding ice packs and cold blocks. And it's one of the things where I'm not going to compare lots of other devices, but sometimes people use these kinds of things, and sometimes they might see that this is a better option. There are some times where people aren't familiar with the CuddleCot, don't know fully how to use it. And because of a lack of training, sometimes people just aren't familiar with it, so jump to something that they know. And people know ice packs. It's very familiar. They use them in the picnics. They use them in the freezer. But equally, it's not necessarily something I would ever recommend as a midwife or in my role at CuddleCot. So obviously an ice pack can get to -18 degrees, which then could freeze onto the baby's skin. And as I said before, we're not here to cause more damage. It's not regulated or temperature controlled, so it will begin to warm up. Warming up and meeting the warm air in the around the cold pack or whatever it is will form condensation that can make the baby feel very wet and soggy, which sometimes can be quite distressing for the family, because if there's any like bits of blood or anything, it can become quite evident and spread across their clothes, which for families can be quite alarming. You don't always know at what point you need to switch it out, and then obviously the baby will begin to warm up. And it's obviously something that's never been designed for a baby, it's been designed for food. So the use of ice packs is something that I would heavily suggest you do not use, or even question why it's being used. So with the CuddleCot itself, there's lots of options for families to be able to use it in many different ways, from using it with a Moses basket, using it with a cot, using it with whatever they have already. They can obviously keep it in the bed with them, so that the baby can be with them as well. And it just gives a bit more flexibility in the choices that they have. One of the things that we heavily say is a CuddleCot isn't for everybody, but it should always be a choice. And there are many hospitals that do have them, and sometimes they might only offer them if a family's going home, but often CuddleCots can give a bit more flexibility than what other devices can. And sometimes it's even important just to say these are the two options we have, and why you would recommend cooling, talking a family through it. You don't have to use words like because the baby will deteriorate or they'll look worse and things like that, because their baby's not a piece of fruit that's going to go off, but their baby will change, and that's okay to explain that. And we recommend cooling the baby because your baby will begin to change, and these processes can be slowed down a little bit more if we cool baby. Baby might be cold to touch, but we can wrap baby up and we can keep them warm and we can put a hat on them, and all those things that families want to do to keep the baby warm, the instinctive nature of parenting, we encourage, because it actually insulates everything to do with the CuddleCot. We're producing some more resources that are going to be on our website in the next couple of weeks, that show you how to wrap the baby really effectively as well. So you can make it really easy for families to just pick up the baby and not feel any cold, but be able to cuddle them as well. So hopefully that will help more people. I've tried not to fill the slides significantly, so that people can ask questions if there's anything specific they do want to ask. And obviously myself and Steve, and I'm sure Claire, are happy to answer any questions, or even later if you do want to follow up with an email, you're more than welcome to.
So many thanks to Steve and Steph. That's really a lovely overview of the CuddleCot. We've already had some people feeding back, apart from questions, saying, this is some comments. Ellie, hi Ellie, says, love a CuddleCot. And Alicia St. Louis, CuddleCot, best equipment ever. And Ellie, that's 2 bites of the apple, and that's just a different Ellie. So easy to use and allows the family to use a normal Moses basket for their baby. Now, I'm looking away, and just for those who haven't been in the maternity hour before, I have 2 screens, and that's where the questions and comments are coming through. So the nice comments are coming through there. And we have a question. Actually, I think there are two questions that I think will fit nicely, Steph and Steve. And one is from Hayley Woodhead. Hi, Hayley, who says, can the CuddleCot be rented?
So typically, in a hospital setting, you'd usually have that the hospital would already have them, and then it wouldn't be rented as in a paid process in the UK anyway. In the UK, it would typically just be loaned. But also some funeral directors have them too. So it just depends on that relationship between the hospital and the funeral home. So in most cases, they would offer the CuddleCot to either be used at home from the hospital or used from the funeral home, depending on what the situation is. In some countries where care is paid for, it is something that is paid for as a service. But obviously in the UK, that's not something we do. So that means that it's not a paid service.
It would also be worthwhile speaking to the local children's hospice as well, because many of the facilities around the UK have multiple CuddleCots, and the whole principle about them is, again, we mentioned it before, choice. Given that family the choice, whether they want to use a hospital, home, or even in the hospice, it's well worth asking around. If your ward hasn't got one, or the one that you have got is busy at the moment or something, it's well worth asking around.
Right. And I mean, actually, it strikes me this is a really good piece of equipment. If you are seeking your local charity come to you and say, do you need some equipment? This sounds a really family centered piece that could be given. Because I can just imagine needing two CuddleCots at the same time. It would be very typical, sadly. So thank you for that. That's lovely. And Debbie Matchin says, can CuddleCots be used to take a baby home? Is it down to hospital policy if allowed? Many thanks.
So by technicality, there's not anything legal to say you can't take a baby home unless, for example, there was coroner investigations ongoing, which we won't go into too much detail of that. But basically, if there's an investigation ongoing, then no. But it might be that later you might be able to. But it sometimes depends on kind of the standard operating procedures that hospitals have put in place and whether they feel they can offer the appropriate support. So this is where it can be helpful, where if funeral homes do have it all work really well with the hospital, it can give more choices then. So it's something that we're actually working on at the moment to provide kind of better support and education to funeral homes, so that they feel equipped to be able to support the families, because they're typically on call 24/7. Someone's always got their phone on. They're kind of usually in the local area. So it just means that then if the baby does need picking up because the family just have changed their mind, someone's there. Whereas the hospitals, a lot of the time, obviously they're running a 24/7 service with emergencies. They can't just get up and leave. Community teams are on call for home births and things. So it's making sure things are appropriate, and also the right staff equipped with knowledge about bereavement are available, because your bereavement midwife might be at home in bed. So if you've got your community midwife on call, that might not be the best person and potentially might cause more harm for the family and for them. Yeah. So we're hoping we can upskill those people to make sure we can provide a better service.
No, that's grand. That's good. I mean, and I think that's a good point about organising with the local funeral directors. And no, I mean, that's important for us as midwives to know our local funeral directors and what facilities they have, and kind of developing a relationship. I mean, the bereavement midwives, I suspect, know their directors very well, but it's kind of one of those things, especially in a continuity model, you'd need to be aware of. Okay, thank you for that one. So the next one, Gemma, hi Gemma, says, amazing invention. Well done, Steph and Steve. And then we've got Rachel says, is there a gestation that would be suitable to use the CuddleCot from, or can it be used for any baby? Good question, Rachel.
Is that yours, Steph?
Yeah, so more or less, realistically, kind of any gestation, but typically around kind of 14, 16 weeks onwards. The smallest pad typically for babies growing at a normal typical rate up to around 20, 22 weeks is the smaller pad. And then beyond that is babies from that gestation onwards. But then typically as well, if you've got twins who are smaller, you can put two of them on the larger pad. Sometimes as well, if the parents have the baby in bed and they're going to move around a bit more, you might want to use the larger pad even though the baby's smaller. So it means you can adapt it to the circumstances and the size of the baby. And there's sometimes families don't always choose to spend time with their baby and some do. And because the pad's quite small, you can kind of just put it in a smaller Moses basket as well. So even if the baby's tiny, you can kind of fill out the surrounding bits in a Moses basket as well if they do look tiny in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that's grand. Okay. Well, we've got Claire Angel says, thank you, Claire. Important not to be scared of supporting families with baby loss. And then we've got another comment from Claire Larkin, who may be known to you, Claire. She says, thank you, Claire. Miss your amazing bereavement care on a weekly basis. Amazing, inspirational midwife. Keep doing the fantastic job you're doing. You're a literal angel. Always lovely to get feedback. Thank you, Claire, for that. Okay, so we've got another question from Claire Angel. What do you look for to get an indication that the parent is ready to receive information and talk about what they want? I think that might be one more for Claire, though I think Steph probably might have a view too.
Yeah, I think this is all about being receptive to a family. And when you go in and it's just taking the cues from a family. If you go in and you introduce yourself and you start talking and you can see that the family just aren't ready to receive that information, it's about telling them that you're here for them when they're ready and you'll come back to them at a time that's right for them, and just letting them know that that's absolutely fine. And quite often you'll leave and then they'll, make sure they've got their buzzer, make sure you keep checking on them just to make sure, that they're okay, especially sometimes when they're waiting for loved ones to join them as well, about not leaving them alone. But I think it's all about why that continuity of care is so important, about listening to the cues, reading the signs, and just not rushing the information that you need to share with the family, but doing it at a time that's right for them. And I think it's always important as well, when you have given information, that you do, speak to a family about, are they clear? Make sure you're offering questions and even get them to reconfirm their understanding of what's going to happen, so that you're sure that they've had that information, and always back it up with written information as well, so that when they go home, that they've got that written contact that they can always call, text, email if they've got any questions at all.
And I think that's a lovely point, Claire, because I think one of the things, and any of the audience who have been bereaved will know, you get told a lot of stuff and you don't remember it. You literally, even, and people can get, well, I told her that, she don't. But when you're in that situation, your brain kind of is a little bit numb, and you need someone to be able to be very patient and sometimes repeat things. And I think the idea of getting them to say, well, what are you clear on that? What did you take from what I said? Is a really good point. So thank you for that. Now we've got another question from Laura M. Hi, Laura, who says, how could a student midwife be part of the support offered to families, and how do we navigate the learning aspect of our presence in the room without it seeming like we're spectators of their grief? Lovely question, Laura. Tricky one. I'd suspect Claire and Steph probably have a view on this. Did you want to take a turn, Steph, maybe?
Yeah, I think what can be really useful is, especially when you're getting handover of care, that obviously sometimes happens in the room or outside your room, depending on who you work with and what the situation is. But at an early point, I think it's quite important for anyone who's a mentor or supporting a student to one, advocate, but also safeguard students to kind of take a step outside, have a chat, and set kind of those boundaries and expectations and give them ideas of the things they can do. So even you're going to do your general labour care or induction care and things like that, but also it can be useful to familiarize yourself with something like a memory box. So find out, do you have for Lewis memory boxes? Do you have Simba memory boxes? Do you have any other memory boxes? Find out what you have, familiarize yourself with all the items in that box, and then maybe you can then prompt things like a memory box early on in care, because it's quite useful for families to know that that is for them. So, and if they become familiar with it earlier, it often can help them decide to create memories later on. You can then say, would you like me to go through it with you? Would you like to take some time? I can come back and answer any questions. And I think just being proactive in those, and when you are with the midwife that you're also working with, listening to those conversations and seeing how receptive they are, but also take it in from everyone you work with, because there are some things that you will hear and see from some people that you work with, you think they're the last kind of midwife I want to be. But equally, there's going to be others where you're like, I dream of being like them. And there's going to be little things you'll take from everyone, and everyone's not going to be perfect. But I also kind of want to emphasize that there is very much a lack of education that's been around for a long time. And the bereavement midwife role isn't to take over, it's to guide and support those staff. And some are better than others at doing that. But equally, a lot of midwives haven't always had that education, and some of them don't feel that confident. So don't always see it as a bad thing. They are trying their best, but sometimes it's difficult to have a student there too. So it might not be that they're saying don't want a student because they don't want you. They might be saying it because actually they feel like they're being observed, not the family. So don't take it personally. But equally, I think it can also be important for you to say, I'd say especially post second and third year, saying, I feel like this exposure is important. I know I need to get births and other exposures, but this is going to be something I need to know when I'm qualified. So don't be scared of getting that exposure either.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Claire, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of online training that you can access that's often free. So look into that, e-learning for health, watching The Deafening Silence, Say My Baby's Name from Abigail's charity. Those are really insightful videos to see from a parent's eyes. We're fortunate in that we rotate all of our third year students into our service for a week so they can learn at their own pace and at their own speed, because some students may never have even seen a baby that's died before, and then you've also got to overcome that as well, so that you're not shocked and that your expressions and the way you are doesn't go over onto a family. So I think try and engage with your bereavement team and learn from them, and don't be frightened to say what you are and you're not comfortable with if you've never experienced it before, and just try and access as much online training that you can beforehand to prepare yourself.
And I think that's a lovely point from both Steph and Claire, because I think as a society, we're quite uncomfortable with dealing with death. And when it's attached to birth, it's incredibly difficult. And sometimes when you're dealing with supporting a family, the things that you haven't dealt with yourself in your own life can come bubbling up. And I think that's what sometimes happens, because there is more about bereavement care in the curriculum. I know that as a teacher, but I know also it's a hugely tricky topic to kind of really handle and absorb properly. And I think you've done a beautiful job at putting that together and kind of giving us some key points. And I'm very aware of the time. We're running over a little bit, and I just wanted to put another comment or two, like a question from Gemma, and this might be for Claire. Will they be offered the support through the perinatal mental health team postnatally?
Yeah, so this varies in each region. A lot of pilot sites have been set up through mental health trusts for maternity and just baby loss. So, for instance, in our region, we've got maternal mental health who offer a clinical psychologist that offers support to parents for post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety management, talking therapies, lots of different things. But if a family are already, if a woman, for instance, is already under the perinatal mental health team, they will continue along with that service and they will link in with the specialist maternal mental health service. But you need to know what's available in your own area because it varies from region to region, which again is something that we all need to work on because it should be standardized so that everyone has that same access, but it does vary from region to region. So it's just about finding out what you have accessible to you.
Fabulous. I think now we're going, actually, just a few comments because I know I've got to wrap up or I'll be shouted at for running it well over. Kelly says, a student midwife who has experienced baby loss. I love how this gives families more time. Is there any estimate of how many days or hours a baby can kept in the cot for? I bet you Steve and Steph know the answer to that within an inch.
There's not like a set cut-off, because it's very subjective, and for a lot of families, everything, it's so different. It depends on the appearance of the baby when they first are born. And for some families, obviously, if it's a neonatal death, then they've already seen their baby alive. So that kind of difference can be different, and how you've met your baby. So if you've met your baby and they've already died versus having met them alive and died. And then that time frame, how that baby changes over time is different for every baby. Depends on the environment they're in, depends whether the CuddleCot's used in the way it should be. It depends whether families choose to keep the baby in it or not. So obviously with the CuddleCot, you could literally never have to take the baby off it and still move the baby around and do everything as normal. Whereas with other devices, they're in it or they're out of it. So there are a lot of choices. And I know we've known of families who've had the baby for 3 weeks, had the baby at home over Christmas and met the family, and everyone's going to be different. So I think it's quite subjective. So it's not set. It's just more based on kind of what the family want and what feels right for them, but also helping them to process that handover. And there's going to be a point where they're going to have to say goodbye. But also I think giving them a chance to be like, this isn't goodbye, it's for now. It's not forever. Like at some point, whatever brings comfort for them. So obviously for some people that's religion, or that kind of like your baby's DNA is always part of your DNA, and things like that. So, and having something physical, so holding something of babies, or even sleeping with something of theirs every night, or changing their outfit. So sometimes that helps people with that handover process and that transition. Do they want to leave their baby, or do they want us to take the baby first? What would their preference be? So sometimes it's having those conversations too before you make that decision of how long, what is that endpoint, and how do you want it to look? So it helps prepare them too.
Fabulous. That's a very full. I mean, I think that your comments earlier, Steph, about being very honest with the parents and talking about how the baby may change was really helpful with that answer. So thank you very much. Now I'm just going to say a final comment from our audience, and you've been fantastic, and thank you so much for participating as usual in a fantastic way. Katerina, hi Katerina, says, your presentations were lovely. Congratulations. I was wondering if all the things you mentioned apply equally to surrogate mothers and the adoptive parents. Thank you. I think this is a huge topic, Katerina, which we may have to move for a future event. And I'm just going to park that with Steph and Claire and Steve. Because I have to bring now to the close. I'm so sorry. I always say this hour goes quicker than any other hour in the whole entire week, month and year. But I want to say a huge thank you to Steph, Steve and Claire for joining us this evening, and to the audience who've been so good with fantastic questions, really helped us sort of discuss some key issues. And I know you're probably all thinking, more. Well, we will. I promise, because we have to. It's an important topic on this Baby Loss Awareness Week. So thank you also to Angelo, who's behind the scenes, who's going to turn all of this into a nice recording that'll be accessible. And for those of you who are early morning people, a podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday. And also to Paul, who's been feeding me the questions on my other screen. And just to say, next week we're doing midwifing through the menopause. So I hope to see many of you there. But don't forget to book. There's some forthcoming things that are going on, like the Student Midwife Experience, 8th of November, free to attend for students and newly qualified midwives. The Midwife Education Conference, 15th of November, all online. Great value to attend for that one. Smashing speakers, absolutely superb. Then we have, now I mustn't forget, we've got the Scotland Festival on the 28th of November. And that's all I'm going to say for now, except a huge thank you to everybody. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week for more, but not on this topic, but midwifing through the menopause. Thank you. Bye.